Hello everybody. Just wanted to make a video concerning the recent developments in the hardware industry, namely Apple adopting ARM. So some of you may think this is just a marketing move. It has no real rational basis other than Apple wanting to make even more money. And although I do think it will make Apple a lot more money, let's get into the technical details of why this may be a good move and some of the larger trends at play here. So what is happening in the hardware industry right now? Well, more and more hardware is going towards what's called a RISC-based architecture. What is the difference between a RISC-based architecture and CISC, or complex instruction set? Well, x86 is based on CISC, and we know that x86 is a very complicated standard. Actually, there's no one x86 standard. When we look at x86, there are instructions such as AVX 512 and other vector extensions, etc., that are very inconsistent through versioning and versions of different Intel Core processors and so on. We have an inconsistent kind of architecture, and also, not only is it inconsistent, it is pretty old. Most of the CPUs built on x86 aren't as power efficient, and they are optimized for a huge set of instructions. So why would Apple want an instruction set with less instructions? More is better, right? Well, the reason is because a lot of the instructions that were used by x86 to kind of secretly optimize all of these operations put on the CPU is all those operations that you would be using vector extensions for, etc., can be done on GPU probably. So I think that what Apple is trying to do is they're trying to separate HPC from their main consumer-based strategy. And so for them, it's kind of an advantage because iOS has a huge ecosystem, Mac has a huge ecosystem. What you're going to see is crossover, you're going to see cross-pollination, etc. And so from a technical point of view, RISC and thus ARM can be optimized by Apple for more general use cases. And Apple has some of the most advanced microprocessor manufacturing plants in the world. And so they want to be able to optimize for most use cases. And so what does that mean? It means that Apple can take control of their processor design, and they can have a more integrated product. Now, how do I compare ARM and RISC-V? Well, RISC-V is an open ISA for manufacturers to manufacture and produce. So RISC-V came out of University of Berkeley, and ARM came out of ARM Holdings, which I think operates out of the UK. Now, RISC-V was actually created by a research team, but it was it was assisted by the creator of the RISC-based architecture. And the reason why this is important is because there's a huge legacy that RISC-V is kind of going to be creating, and China is highly motivated to start using RISC-V. Now, why is China motivated to start using RISC-V? I mean, there's already ARM. Why would they spend all this money into investing into a new ISA that's not much different? Well, ARM is tightly controlled. It is Western technology. When we look at RISC-V is open source. RISC-V can be extended by anyone, implemented by anyone. So RISC-V is going to be used by China. It's being invested already into by Alibaba and other groups. And there's a huge incentive for these smaller companies to go with RISC-V because ARM charges you an arm and a leg to develop on their ISA. Now, I think RISC-V, if you actually write assembly, RISC-V is kind of the most pleasurable to use. Now, does that mean it's going to be the king? I don't know. There's a good chance that RISC-V will just be a toy, or maybe not a toy, but only for Internet of Things use cases, which would be kind of disappointing because it'd be ironic if the devices that spy on us and collect data on everything we use, such as our toasters, is based on an open source ISA. But then, going back to these nefarious entities that want to control our data, that would be extremely ironic. But, it really depends if there is to come a challenger in the desktop space for RISC-V. I don't know if we're going to see that. We might see Chinese manufacturers trying to create something that's competitive. Companies like Huawei jumping in. But overall, I think that Apple kind of made a good decision because now the ISA space is going to be competitive. What's going to happen is the die shrinkage race is going to kind of wind down. 10 years from now, most CPUs will be 5 nanometer, 7 nanometer. And what's going to happen is these architectures will be at war. Who has the best architecture wins. Apple's betting on RISC and ARM because they know they can optimize it from their experiences optimizing for iOS. And the power usage, they can now play with it. Just imagine, what will an Apple A15 or A17, whatever it is, perform at if power isn't an issue like it is on phones? I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see. So anyway, I think this is part of a larger trend of the industry. I don't really think this should have came as a surprise to most people, but you're going to see more and more people. You're going to see Microsoft jumping in and saying, hey, we want you guys to come back on ARM because they want, ARM 2. More developers are going to be compiling for ARM as a compilation target, etc. So, yeah, that's my opinion on the subject. I also think that processors are due to be less powerful than they were before, in the sense that AVX instructions and all this complicated malarkey, though useful things, and these proprietary extensions are just way too much maintenance for these processor designers to maintain and so on. And so Intel and AMD, they're dealing with that baggage, mainly Intel, but they're dealing with that baggage of having to support all of these instructions and optimize for all of these things. Whereas now we're seeing, at least in HPC, a lot of algorithms that use vector extensions and AVX stuff, that's all moving to GPU. So for Apple, it's kind of like, well, we do abandon some small minority of people using Mac OS for HPC use cases, but in terms of video rendering and all these other things that are high performance use cases on Mac, all of those things are pretty much GPU dependent now. So yeah, so that's the rationale, I think. I hope this gave you a unique perspective. Just wanted to put my thoughts in on this and maybe get some dialogue going. So leave a comment below on what you think about RISC-V as compared to ARM and Apple's decision to move towards ARM, who you think will win. And as always, like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.